Racism exists. There's no denying that. However, people need to distinguish the difference between hating someone because of the color of their skin and hating someone because of their religion. Islamophobia implies people have a fear of Islam. We don't have a fear of Islam. We have a fear of our presidents and our prime ministers not having a fear of Islam, and there's a big difference. Western Muslims claim every day that they are being racially targeted. Yet there are rallies all over the world on a daily basis consisting of thousands and thousands of people against the Islamification of Western countries. The media failed to mention that there is no protesting against Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, nothing. Why? Because these religions are now relatively harmless. These religions now coexist with other religions, with atheists, with homosexuals. These religions have grown up, and they are out of the Stone Age. Islam is not. How many gay clubs do you know of in Saudi Arabia, or Pakistan, or Egypt, or any holy Muslim country? When was the last time you can remember a massacre in the name of Christianity, or Hinduism, or atheism? This century? These Islamophobic rallies I speak of, that probably most of you have never heard of, consist of all walks of life, every skin color under the cultural and racial rainbow, and they include ex-Muslims. These people rallying have no problem with any race, including Arabs. Nobody should, because we're not Neanderthals. The issue is Islam, and it's a religion, not a race. The only difference now is that we live in such a ridiculously over-politically correct world that we have our eyes glued shut by the media and our politicians. Believe it or not, we live in a world where Syria, which is 92% Muslim, have a refugee crisis, and Saudi Arabia, who practically share a border with Syria, take 0 refugees, even though there is a permanent camp at a place called Mina that's empty for 11 months of the year, set up for pilgrims. This camp has 160,000 air-conditioned tents and can house more than 3 million people. That's roughly the number of refugees that Syria has. Now, considering that Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, and if Islam truly is a peaceful religion, let alone if Islam truly is a race, like every do-gooder keeps saying they are, then why hasn't Saudi Arabia come to the aid of its people? Considering Saudi Arabia's wealth and ISIS giving Islam such a bad name, why hasn't Saudi Arabia stomped on ISIS? Why didn't they do it years ago? Better yet, why in every news article we see of ISIS, they have awesome weapons and brand new Toyotas? Why does nobody check the VIN number and ask a question as to how the fuck they got it? Are you starting to connect the dots yet? There's a huge misunderstanding that is always put out there saying that the majority of Muslims are peaceful. ISIS don't represent us, blah blah blah. Well, we have been at war with ISIS for a couple of years now. Do you honestly think that there are that many evil people in the world, all binding together to fight for a simple misunderstanding of what Islam really is? I mean, Hitler managed to do it, but he had to twist the fuck out of Christianity to make his ideology make some form of sense. And by the time people found out he was slaughtering Jews in cold blood, it was too late. How can the majority of Muslims in the world be peaceful when out of the top 10 most violent countries according to the Global Peace Index, 7 of them are over 90% Islamic? That's over 300 million Muslims, or 19% of the world's Muslim population. Another 700 million Muslims, or 45% of the world's Muslim population, live in Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, where Sharia law is very much apparent. Need I say more? Why is there never any media addressing the fact that ISIS are fighting for worldwide Sharia law, and our troops are fighting against that regime because it's barbaric, yet it's okay for Muslims to have Sharia law in Western countries? Is that not the definition of hypocritical? The UK has 85 legally binding Sharia law courts. Google it. The word taqiyya in Islamic terms, it means a Muslim has the ability to lie if it advances the cause of Islam by gaining the trust of the non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and defeat them. How can you trust any Muslim leader when they come out of the woodwork denouncing a terrorist act? There is a ridiculous amount of proof online of Islamic leaders saying one thing to the West and a completely different thing to Muslims during a congregation at a mosque. Here's an example.
How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah.
Surprise, surprise, you'd never see that in the media. Imagine if, in World War II, we were fighting Hitler and his regime, but we allowed Germans to come into Western countries and practice Nazism for the sake of political correctness. There is no way it would happen back then, so why now? Believe it or not, we live in a world where we condemn the inhumane treatment under Sharia law in ISIS-controlled countries. Then we name Saudi Arabia as the human rights ambassador for the UN. That's fucking lunacy. Do you know there is currently a man about to have his head cut off and body crucified publicly in Saudi Arabia because he's peacefully protesting for democracy? But we let it go because they're rich, because they have a lot of oil, and we need oil.
Has not yet
the
been
world
exhausted.
is looking at you and this case with outrage, and you sit on the UN Council for Human Rights.
Again, we request the world to respect our systems and our judicial processes and our laws and regulations, and not to interfere in the internal affairs of a sovereign state.
In the world,
Madam,
for example,
the application of Sharia law as far as human rights is concerned is the highest standard of human rights.
Just to fill you in on what Sharia law really is, I'll list some of the basics while showing you some interesting pictures. Sharia law commands that drinkers and gamblers should be whipped. It allows a husband to hit their wives. It commands that a thief must have his hand cut off. It commands that homosexuals must be executed. It orders unmarried couples who kiss in public to be whipped and adulterers to be stoned to death. It orders death for both Muslims and non-Muslim critics of Muhammad, the Quran, Sharia law, and it orders anyone leaving Islam to be killed. Every Muslim knows this. It's the premise of the fucking Quran. Yet, still, Islamists in Western countries actively seek Sharia law and are illegally practicing it in many cases. The problem even with partial Sharia law is that it spreads. The entire premise of the Quran is to spread full Sharia law worldwide, and it's the duty of all Muslims. Why do you think Muslims are leaving Western countries in droves to fight for ISIS? It's because spreading Sharia is the meaning of every Muslim's existence, and it's written in the Quran. ISIS are chasing Sharia law violently, anyone not fighting are doing it through immigration and procreation, but ultimately, long term, what's the difference? There are three types of Muslims from a Western safety point of view, and here's the difference. 1. Peaceful Muslim. These people are very quickly becoming a minority. They are usually the most formally educated Muslims, and they assimilate into society, not in ghettos. They genuinely want peace, and move to the West to get it. They ignore the jihad in the Quran out of common sense. They do not want Sharia law at all, not send their children to Islamic schools out of fear of corruption and radicalization. 2. Islamist. They are incredibly strict Muslims. They do not assimilate into the community, and they form ghettos in any community they migrate to. They practice Sharia law, even if it isn't legal in that host country, and the male children have more rights than their mothers. 3. Radicals. An Islamist through and through. They call themselves Muslims and preach the Quran like every other Muslim. But they focus on the violent jihad, and they tell other Muslims that they are not true Muslims unless they involve themselves in that violent jihad. And they typically recruit at mosques and are responsible for most terrorism worldwide for the last few decades. The line between an Islamist and a radical is incredibly thin, and this is where Western society need to focus their efforts. The Quran tells almost 109 verses to push violent jihad. The educated ones with a conscience, or peaceful Muslims, who are now a minority, ignore those parts of the Quran. An Islamist and a child are the two types of people easily turned into radicals, and it's now getting to the point where almost all Islamists praise radicalism and even know radicals themselves. But surprise, surprise, you don't see that in media. If there are so many peaceful Muslims in the world, then why haven't we seen anti-Sharia or anti-ISIS rallies with tens of thousands of Muslims? What about huge Islamic marches condemning Islamic attacks throughout the world? Heaven forbid we should say something about the Prophet Muhammad, though. Every single one of them will march for that shit. Every time there is a terrorist plot executed in a Western country, the first thing the leader of that country does is condemn the actions of those people. Like condemning means a fucking thing to the public. We want to see action. Then they follow it with something like, it's important to remember that this doesn't represent the majority of Muslims. Why does nobody elaborate on the confusion between these Muslims? Who is selling the evil versions of the Quran? Nobody elaborates because nobody can. Islam is Islam. There's no twisting of the faith. And if you don't believe me, do 10 minutes of research and read the Quran yourself. We need to follow the small countries like China, Japan, Angola. They've banned Islamic immigration for a reason. The spread of Islam in the West begins with the illegal implementation of Sharia, like we see with the Muslim-only no-go zones in Europe. Then you will see Muslims running for parliament. Then Sharia becomes partially legal, like we see in the UK. Then when there are enough Muslim MPs, full Sharia is implemented. Our laws don't count for anything when the plan is this long-winded. Believe it or not, we live in a world where ISIS specifically tell us that they're going to infiltrate our country by immigration. Then months later, the Syrian refugee crisis happens. It's full of fit young men, and for the amount of people, very few women and children. We as a civilized world put our hands up and say, we'll house them all. And nobody does shit about it. The West is so ridiculously self-destructive, this needs to alarm you. We've walked on eggshells around this religious ideology for so long now we've forgotten how to walk. We're at the stage now where politicians see Muslims only as voters and are purposely blind to what's going on because they'll never be neighbors to a refugee or be beaten for walking down the wrong Muslim-only street. If the West wants to make a stand against ISIS and begin the slow road to recovery, we all need to do 3 things. 1. We need to make it so that Sharia law can never be legal under any circumstances. Remember, the peaceful minority don't even want it. 2. We need to ban the burqa, like France, Belgium, and the Netherlands have. It's only a matter of time before a radical in a burqa does something terrible. Why wait and prevent our chances from getting their face on camera and catching them? 3. We need to redefine religious freedom laws because there is a huge difference between the freedom of practicing your religion and demanding the beheading of a non-Muslim or death to anyone who has an abortion. In my opinion, the only way forward as a planet is not to remove Islam, it's to remove religion. Its corruption gave us World War II and it's going to give us World War III. What does it take before we say enough is enough and take a harsh stance with religious practices and completely separate it from government? We have priests raping children, Muslims plotting to kill non-Muslims, and Jehovah's Witnesses killing their children by refusing them blood transfused based on their faith. Why can't we just keep the good parts of the culture it gave us over the centuries and let that be enough? Just let belief in God be enough. Imagine if, after World War II, we said, right, that's it, no more religion. Imagine if we separated religion from state, then and there, and it became child abuse to push religion on kids. How fucking amazing would the world be today? The US spent $500 billion a year on military. Imagine if they used that for space travel, or curing disease or poverty. Considering the last few years have been spent fighting religious extremism, it's food for thought.